Would you like to have your query letter critiqued, but you don't want to pay to have that happen? It can be done for free, but it will be public out here on all my socials. My name is Gina. I'm an author, editor, publishing professional. I help you make your writing better. If you would like to submit, information on how to do so is linked in my bio. If you do not want to do this publicly, I do run an editing service, but I am shutting down for November and December in a lot of ways, and so I am booking into the new year for query letter edits. So if that is not something you want to do there, I do have a class available on TikTok that is a 3.5 hour long class that is only $30, in which you can teach yourself this entire process start to finish. And this will be up on Patreon. I believe in October this is going to launch as well, and you'll be able to pay for the class there as well. Let's remember that there is a real life person on the other side of this query, and so I'm going to endeavor to be constructive, not destructive in my criticism, but criticism is always difficult to hear, even when we are trying to be constructive. So everybody be nice in the comment section, and nobody tell them to just go self-publish, because that's not how any of this works. Let's jump in. All right, I am pleased to submit Wishes on the Rocks, a 75,000 word dual POV fantasy romance that blends humor, heart, and a reluctant partnership between a jaded genie and a fiercely independent human. We have talked before, and I will say it again, don't tell me all of the things that are in your story. Show it to me in the actual writing of the query and in the actual blurb paragraphs here. So if there's your humor in your story, then your paragraphs should have some funny in them. Don't go overboard. It's only a couple of 100 words, but you should have a couple of jokes. You should make me at least do the thing where I exhale a little sharply out of my nose, that was funny. But show that in here. If there is heart, then that should come through as well. This should feel earnest. Don't tell me what your book is going to do. Show me that you are capable of doing it. Same thing, if these are your main characters, jaded genie and a fiercely independent human, that should come through in their paragraphs here. All right, so Grant Ashmere, a genie with a track record of wish-granting disasters, like turning a wannabe millionaire's lawn into a sea of pennies, is on his last chance at the magic department. So you understand that you need to show the humor in the paragraphs. Let's do it in a way that is not backstory. Let's do it in the story that is happening now. One more mistake and he loses his magic for good. Desperate to salvage his career and his powers, Grant knows he can't afford another mistake, but what he didn't expect was to be assigned to a client who wants nothing to do with magic or him. So we have disasters, description of the disaster. He's on his last chance. One more mistake and he loses his magic. Desperate to salvage his career, he can't afford another mistake. You told us that he only has one more mistake to make 4 times. We only have a few hundred words in this paragraph or in this query letter. You can't be spending them on telling us the same things over and over again. All right, and then we have what he didn't expect was to be assigned a client. And so the inciting incident of a story is always something that you didn't expect. So don't waste time telling us this. So Grant Ashmere is a genie with a track record of disasters. He has one more chance in him, and now he's been assigned to a client who doesn't want a magic genie. That's what this all comes down to. It does not need to be all of these words. And when we are talking about 75,000 words for a dual POV fantasy romance, 75,000 words for a romance is pretty typical, but 75,000 words for a fantasy is very short indeed. And when we are talking about a dual POV, so we are getting inside the heads of 2 different characters, this feels very short. When you blend this word count with I repeated myself 4 times in the first paragraph, that doesn't bode well. That doesn't tell me that you've actually even earned these 75,000 words. I'm very concerned about whether or not this story is going to be immersive, whether there's going to be complete world building, whether you're really going to get into the interiority of these characters. This is all external stuff. I'm a little bit concerned about whether or not the writing is ready for publication at this point. All right, so James Reynolds is determined to keep her life grounded in reality. After a devastating breakup, she bought a brewery with her brother Jules. Jules better be really important in the next paragraph if we're going to name an additional character. Desperate for a fresh start, but running a business is no fairy tale, and a string of near catastrophes is threatening to destroy everything she's worked for. The last thing she needs is magic. Nah, you've told us the same thing 3 times. Especially in the form of our sarcastic genie trying to force a wish she never wanted. So yeah, you're being very repetitive here. And this is actually a thing that a lot of writers struggle with in the manuscript as well, where they will tell us something from one character's point of view, and then they will switch to the other point of view, and then they think they need to tell us all of that stuff again from the other character's point of view, and you don't usually. It can be helpful to see some things from the other character's perspective, or to back up by 5 seconds within the scene in order to oh, we're in the same scene right now, really keep readers grounded in what we are doing. But you don't need to tell us everything from everybody's point of view. The reader has already seen the genie's point of view. We don't need to also hear it from her. It gets repetitive quickly. All right. So, but again, here, she is a no nonsense kind of a person. So, really, what we have is more like an opposites attract, right? Like, we have that this is like a feels like a rivals to lovers kind of thing almost, right? Like, we have described this in a way that felt very flat when you actually have some other stuff that is kind of fun, but you're not really shining the spotlight on it. Let's keep going. So, when Grant gets assigned to James as his client, you've told us that now so many times. They clash in all the wrong and right ways. Grant needs to grant her a wish to say, Grant. See, you are funny. You can do this within the paragraphs. You don't need to tell us up top that you are funny. Grant needs to grant her a wish to save his career, but James has no intention of asking for one. There needs to be more to this. Or this query letter only needs to be like 275 words. Like, you do not need to, just because you can use 500 words doesn't mean you have to use 500 words. If you've got a pitch that's really straightforward and really simple, just lean into that. Be really pithy and quick and clever and get in, get out, and have everyone be like, oh, I wish there was more of this. Instead of the, oh, I wish there was more of this. Right now, you're like, you told me that already. Like, you're better than this. I'm positive of it. All right, so James has no intention of asking for one. As tensions rise, their reluctant partnership takes unexpected turns because while they might be each other's worst nightmare, they might also be exactly what the other needs. Okay, so I think that this is a romance set in a fantasy world. This is not a fantasy. This is a romance with like some magical elements or some fantasy elements to it. So this word count makes more sense now when we are talking about the fact that this is very like real world contemporary. He just happens to have some magic to it. So I would pitch this differently. And yeah, come down here. We've got X, Hex, and Love hypothesis. Okay, so this is a romance with some fantasy elements. So this is more like liar, right? Like where this is a real world, but it has this like one speculative element running through it. This isn't a fantasy in the sense that we're expecting like world building and all of that stuff. Okay, so I would pitch this differently. You are writing a romance, and this has some fantasy elements in it. The word count's going to make more sense. Stop repeating yourself over and over again. And I understand the irony of me saying that 12 times in this video. I get it. Much shorter paragraphs for each of these character introductions. This is very simple, straightforward stuff, and that's not a problem. There are a ton of people who want these cozy romance, fantasy, like intimate, quiet stakes. We don't need these to be big, expansive paragraphs. Get in, get out, shrink it down. You have all of those elements that we are looking for. We know who our main characters are. We know what they want. We know what's standing in their way. We know what happens if they fail. We know all of the things. You have the information in here. Just cut it down. Like, you're better than all of this and you don't trust yourself yet. And that's why you're saying the same things over and over and over and over again. You got this.